What's up? Welcome to National Pleasure, your Nic Cage headquarters. Hey there, I'm your host Doug Mellard, and it is time to explore the world around us through the eyes of Nicolas Cage. It's gonna be fun, because this time we're discussing Vampire's Kiss. That's right, the classic Nic Cage film, Vampire's Kiss. Directed by Robert Bierman, written by Joseph Minion. If you haven't seen it, oh man, it was a fun rewatch. Wow, this film is crazy. Absolutely crazy. If you haven't seen it, it centers around Peter Lowe, obviously portrayed by Nicolas Cage, who's a money-hungry literary agent living in New York City and is desperately lonely and seeking love and hates anyone that has already found it. It's basically a look at the life of an incel whose resentment of women is driving him insane. Early on in the movie, he is bitten by a female vampire, and throughout the rest of the film, he is slowly becoming one. Or so he thinks. The vampire, who isn't real, is actually a manifestation of his fears of intimacy, embodied by a kind of idealized fantasy woman who keeps him from actually connecting with anyone. He takes out all his insecurities and hatred for women on his secretary, his poor secretary, Alva, played by Maria Conchita Alonso, who I was very excited. I'd forgotten she was in the film. You might know her from Running Man. I love her. And man, their relationship, Peter and Alva, it's not good. It gets absolutely nuts. And Alva should 100% quit working for Peter, no matter how badly she needs the job. He is not a good person on any level. He's absolutely terrifying. He is not a good human being. In the end, Peter gets what's coming to him by means of Alva's brother. Spoiler alert. Turn off if you want to go watch this right now. Killing him. Again, Cage plays a very unlikable character. Someone you don't want to root for, other than separating yourself from what that character actually is and watching and obviously loving Nicolas Cage. What keeps you watching is his insane vampire delusion and his slow transformation into a vampire, which is really just his slow descent into insanity. This, along with Cage's over-the-top performance, which he pulls out all the stops for. I mean, it is... As far as Cage performances, it really is the best. It's so good. This is a very intense movie that is kind of framed in a somewhat silly manner. It's really out there for the 80s. And I mean, the 80s was pretty out there in general. The cocaine-fueled Hollywood of the 80s. But this is just a wild flick. It features crazy concepts and bizarre humor. Very, very dark humor. It's very, very strange, but very, very memorable. And it really takes some big swings. Most of those big swings coming from our boy, Nicolas Cage. It definitely has parts where you're wondering, what is going on? There's a scene where after he's convinced he's a vampire, he's chasing a pigeon and trying to eat the pigeon, because I guess vampires eat pigeons now. It kind of made sense to me. It kind of didn't at all. It felt more like werewolf-y to me. There's also a scene where he's kind of gone crazy and he's in a bathroom and there's a guy just yells out, "Hey man, I'm taking a dump. Can you move this elsewhere?" And that made me laugh so hard. You just don't hear the words taking a dump too often in films, especially nowadays. And it felt uneven for the movie, like a poop joke like that, but it got me pretty good. And there are many parts where it just gives Cage, I mean, pretty much the whole film, it gives Cage plenty of room to simply go crazy, and that is what is fun to watch. Now, Nicolas Cage was 24 at the time of filming, or thereabouts, and you could tell, he really wanted this to be like the breakout, Nicolas Cage is here, Hollywood, come check me out. This seemed like it was the true birth of Cage as an actor. It really put him on the map. There was no looking past him after this film. He threw everything at the wall, and a lot of it stuck, obviously, because he's still kicking butt and taking names all these years later. In a pretty recent interview, Nicolas Cage said that the reason he loved doing Vampire's Kiss was because the film combined horror and comedy, and he said that both of those embody madness. Cage grew up watching films like Caligari and Nosferatu, and he references those films a lot. A lot of silent films, he's big fans of that. And he used this influence and put it into Vampire's Kiss. And you can really see that. I think they have Nosferatu on at one point in the background in the film. And you can see a lot of the mannerisms that he brought into that. So it's pretty cool. And it's especially cool for a very young actor to bring in these silent film influences at the time. Now, one thing that jumped out immediately to me, right out of the gates, is Cage's choice for his character's voice. It's somewhere between Keanu Reeves and British at times, but kind of fluctuates here and there. I had to rewind early on to play back a line because I was confused. I thought he was doing some sort of accent. But yeah, a lot of times he sounds very like Valley Boy almost, Surfer Boy or something. It's crazy. It's a real interesting choice. Now, perhaps the greatest thing to come from this film was that some of the biggest Nic Cage memes of all time originated from this movie. And that's saying a lot because there are countless. Feels like an infinite source of Nic Cage memes. But some of the biggest ones come from this. You'll recognize them, you'll be watching the movie, and you're almost taken out of the movie because of these visions and memes that you've seen for years and years now. It's quite shocking in a great way. Oh, and also, in this movie, he does eat a real live roach. That's right. He actually ate a roach for the film. And, get this, not once, but twice, he ate a roach. He just went for it. The director made him do it twice. He wanted to do it, he wanted to be authentic. Exploring the movie a little bit further, the release date was June 2nd, 1989. It had a budget of $2 million and grossed $725,000. Yikes. Yeah, it actually obviously didn't do very well. It got some pretty terrible reviews at the time. Some people had some pretty harsh things to say. A couple other movies that came out that same weekend, Dead Poets Society and No Holds Barred, starring Hulk Hogan. Yeah. So, I don't think No Holds Barred really had much of an effect with Vampire's Kiss at the box office, but I'm sure Dead Poets Society, which got a lot of buzz, Oscar buzz, did. And on top of that, what really didn't help was that Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade was already running away at the box office, while Star Trek V was set to release the next weekend, followed up by Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, Ghostbusters 2, and of course, a few weeks later, Batman. That's right, the juggernaut that was Batman. I mean, 1989, my older brother and I talk about this all the time. We refer to it as the greatest summer of movies ever. So to be released right in that sweet spot of all these giant mega hits, that didn't help anything. So Vampire's Kiss, a quirky indie flick, never really had much of a chance at all. It was just completely swallowed up. However, it did become a cult classic over time, and it is probably, of course, again, one of the most memed movies ever. And now that Nic Cage has brought us to the subject, let's talk vampires. I already discussed Dracula in a previous Nic Cage video, but again, because we're here, I'm going to talk some vampire lore. Cage is tied to vampires in a variety of ways, so this subject will come up again. Here are some vampire facts. The history of vampires is long and complex, with origins in ancient civilizations and folklore from many cultures. The vampire postdates witch hunts, werewolf trials, and even the demon-haunted Puritans. The concept of the vampire as an undead creature inflicting harm originated in Eastern Europe, specifically in Bulgaria, 1,000 years ago. So they've been around a while. Now again, it stems from a lot of different folklore. Ancient Mesopotamia, they had the Ikamu, which was a vengeful spirit that haunted the living and drained their life force. In ancient Greece, I'm going to butcher the name, but they had stories of the Vrikalakas, relentless spirits that terrorized the living. In medieval Europe, there were tales of walking corpses that drank the blood of the living and spread plague. In Eastern Europe, the concept of the vampire was an undead creature originated in Bulgaria, as I said before, where the word vampire roughly translates to ghost monster. In Central Europe, in the early 18th century, verbal traditions of many ethnic groups were recorded and published, leading to the folklore of the vampire as we know it today. In England, the Berwick vampire was an early example of an undead creature that rose from the grave at night to terrorize the living. In Jewish folklore, The Lilith was a 4,000-year-old figure who is believed to be hungry for victims because she had once been human. In the Philippines, the Manananggal, probably butchered it, is a creature that some believe can shapeshift into a woman and suck blood from the bellies of pregnant women. It's crazy to think about all this folklore coming from all these different places when back then there was no Google, there's no search for vampire. It just slowly spread by word of mouth or letters or whatever. Now, the concept of the vampire may be linked to diseases such as rabies and tuberculosis and all sorts of stuff. For example, rabies causes biting, a fear of light, and altered sleep patterns, which are all elements of how vampires are described in folklore. The first vampire in history is Juragrando Alilovic, or Juragrando, who lived from 1578 to 1656. That was a villager from the region of Istria in modern-day Croatia, who may have been the first real person described as a vampire in historical records. He was referred to as a strigon, a local word for something resembling a vampire and a warlock. Juragrando died in 1656 due to illness, but according to legend, returned from the grave at night as a vampire and terrorized his village until his decapitation in 1672. Good Lord, so he died in 1656, and they came back and made sure he was super dead by cutting off his head in 1672, if I have that correctly. Wow. Those times were different back then. And there you have it. There's some fun vampire facts that Nicolas Cage brought us to. I love it. Let's praise Nicolas Cage for educating us even further. And now it's time for Nic Cage in the news. It's always exciting when we get a little sniff of a new project of his. And this one, for me, is doubly exciting because I am a comic book fan. Spider Noir has begun principal photography in LA, and the first photographs were taken of Nic Cage as his mysterious Marvel superhero, who is reportedly not going to be Peter Parker. The setting of the photos, it looks like it's going to be like 1930s New York, which is cool. I can't wait for this series. I'm so excited. I felt like when the news is slowly coming out about Nic Cage maybe doing this, it seemed like it was going to happen, then not going to happen. So it's really cool that we're doing it. Nic Cage is already filming. This is so good. The log line for Spider Noir is, it's an aging, grizzled private investigator in 1930s New York, grappling with his dark past as the city's mass vigilante. Battling crime in a corrupt city, he faces dangerous enemies and uncovers sinister plots. His journey through shadowy alleyways and moral ambiguities is filled with action, intrigue, and noir-style narration. That sounds awesome. All right, time for a Face Off 2 update, and this is going to happen a lot, but there is no Face Off 2 update. Don't be mad at me. I'm sorry. But again, that's good news because there is no news, so that means it's still going. So I'm here waiting for that first tiny crumb to give you guys, but I don't have it yet. In the meantime, let's just appreciate that it is currently still in development. So that's good. All right, it's time for my favorite segment, and that is, what is Nic Cage doing right now? I believe right now Nicolas Cage is wearing an Easter Bunny suit for no particular reason while he holds a jousting tournament in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. The winner of the tournament is awarded an original Van Gogh painting, while the loser must get a full back tattoo of Nic Cage fighting a lion. Man, I'm so bummed I'm not a part of this tournament. And honestly, that's not even a loser. That's also a winning prize. A back piece of Nic Cage fighting a lion? That's awesome. I hope to lose this tournament someday. That'd be so great. If I got to lose this to Nic Cage and then get a Nic Cage full body tattoo, that's rad. All right, guys, that's it. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe, like, comment, spread the word, and come back for more. Can't wait to see where Nic Cage takes us next.